Hey, this is RockMan. Welcome to RockMan Reads a Freakin Book, where DK left off. My friend DK started reading I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole, one chapter at a time on YouTube. For various reasons, he did not continue after chapter 17. I wanted to know how it ended, so I bought the book and finished it myself. With his permission, I will now read the rest of the book for you. I plan to read 3 chapters per video. I will put a link in the description to the playlist of DK reading chapters 1 through 17. Today I will be starting with chapter 18. If you've already listened to the first 17 chapters but it's been a while, here is a recap. Corran Horn is a member of Rogue Squadron. One day he comes home to find his wife Mirax missing. Somehow he knows, seemingly through the Force, that she has been kidnapped. He consults Luke Skywalker for help. Luke suggests that Corran may be Force-sensitive because his biological grandfather was a Jedi. Luke also suggests that Corran should go undercover as Kieran Halcyon at Luke's new Jedi Academy. And by that I mean Luke wants to teach some people to become Jedi because we know that idea will never go horribly wrong. In fact, it does when a student named Gantoris is murdered and the only suspect is a dead Sith Lord named Exar Kun. So now, chapter 18. I think Master Skywalker planned on or hoped for something a bit festive in the way of a meal for our guest. This meant I got tagged with kitchen duty. While I didn't really have any formal training in the culinary arts, and the holocron had not revealed any Jedi power oriented toward making food taste good, I had been raised on Corellia and had seen a fair amount of the galaxy. Luke reasoned that I knew more about interesting food than a Bespin hermit or Dorsk 81, especially because the clone's digestive system was so specialized he could only eat processed food wafers. Ugh. Luckily for me, I'd learned all I needed to know about cooking from the chef on Sioli Tinta's private yacht. During a party with which I had become bored, I met Chid. Like all great artists, he asserted he only needed one name, and we chatted about the self-important guests on the cruise. We also drank, and after a lot of chatting and even more drinking, Chid confided in me the keys of great culinary success. First, make portions small. If they want more, they think it was good. 2, give the dish an exotic name and make it sound like there are secret spices in there. Snobs will spend much time trying to see if their palate is sophisticated enough to detect 1 part per million of Ithorian saffron, and they won't dare pass judgment on the food for fear someone will think them a boor. 3, serve things that are supposed to be cooked raw, and serve hot things cold. Make them think it's special. 4, most important, tell them you created it special for them. Only a Gamorrean would protest such an honor. The Academy's supplies weren't really long on spices. Calling them survival rations would actually be stretching a point, but mashing up ration bars, mixing them with fruit compotes, and baking them into long, slender loaves that I sliced on a bias made for an interesting bread-like food. Dried meat became something of a stew with enough boiling, and tossing the dried veggies into the meat broth allowed them to soak up some flavor. And since we'd all gotten to realizing that the grain gruel the New Republic sent probably wouldn't kill us, I concentrated on spicing it and garnishing a big plate of it with a couple blue leaf sprigs that made the yellowish mound of grain look special for the occasion. I also included the obligatory salad of local greens, but only because Master Skywalker seemed to enjoy it. I just finished serving everything and was returning from the kitchen after shutting down the stove when Kip stormed out of the dining room and clipped me with a shoulder. "Hey Kip, what's the problem?" The younger man said nothing and continued to stalk down the corridor. I ran after him and caught up with him after a couple of steps. I dropped my left hand on his left shoulder. "Kip, answer me." Kip whirled beneath my hand, his dark eyes blazing. I felt something solid hit my chest, but I'd already begun to move to my right. The force blow he aimed at me glanced off the left side of my chest, yet was strong enough to bounce me off the corridor wall. I caught myself against the rough stones, but not before I'd slid halfway to the floor. "You are not my master." Kip shifted from pointing at me to pointing back toward the dining room. He is not my master. What good is it being a Jedi if we do not act? What good is it if we are Jedi that don't act responsibly? I hauled myself upright. Remember, Kip, no good Jedi kicked Exar Kun's butt. Quote-unquote no good Jedi. Kip struck at me again through the Force, but I expected it this time. I relaxed and let the Force energy flow over and through me. I absorbed enough of it to let me create a shield that split the attack. The fact that I didn't end up being ground back against the wall surprised him. You're good, Kip, but you're not great. I held my hands up in a non-threatening gesture. You're involved with someone who lost a long time ago. Don't compound his error. And who will stop me? I hesitated because Kip's words seemed to echo within themselves. It took me a second or two to figure out that the echo wasn't a purely auditory phenomenon. I was hearing Kip's voice through my ears, but the undertones were coming to me through the Force. We were not alone, which meant Kip's mentor had come to aid his apprentice. I will if you make it necessary. An ancient sneer of contempt twisted Kip's features. Puny Jedi, you are of no concern to me. Even though I braced myself for another attack, it did no good. Kip's previous Force blows were like light breezes compared with a full-out gale. I slammed back into the wall with teeth-rattling impact. As my body absorbed Force energy and fed it back out, the shield I'd created grew in size. More importantly, my surprise and survival instinct opened me up to the Force and allowed it to flow into the shield. Even so, Kip's attack jammed the shield back against the wall, and I watched stone crumble beneath its rim. The safe area I had began to shrink, and my chest became tight as it compressed my ribs. I looked Kip straight in the eyes and tried to shoot into his brain the image of the mask of hate he wore, but the world around me went black before I could tell if I'd had any success at all. I awakened probably less than a minute after that, judging by how much of the grain gruel had been consumed in my absence. I hung in the doorway of the dining room, my ribs a bit sore. Streen got up from his place and helped me to a chair while Tion poured me a glass of water. I drank it, wishing it was full of Corellian whiskey. Link's blue eyes became slits. What happened to you? Kip didn't like the menu. I winced as a twinge ran through my ribs. We had a discussion in the hallway. You didn't feel anything? Heads all around the table shook, and I felt cold dread begin to congeal in my stomach. If Exar Kun could mask the attack on me in such a way that Luke could not feel it, barely 15 meters away, then he could have slain Gantoris and could still wreak more havoc here with impunity. We were up against something more powerful than I'd ever cared to imagine existing. I stood. Master Skywalker, I would have a word with you alone. The other apprentices started to get up, but Luke waved them back down into their seats. We will be but a moment. The kitchen? I nodded and followed him. Once alone in the kitchen, Luke turned on me. You should not have attempted to interfere with Kip. I blinked with surprise. I wasn't trying to interfere. He was upset. I just asked what was happening. But you did something to provoke an attack, didn't you? I rubbed a hand along my jaw and leaned back against the conservator. It's an old interrogation technique. I drew a conclusion from what I saw earlier this evening and tried it out. I told him Exar Kun had gotten his butt kicked by the Jedi and that Kun was wrong. I got a reaction, a very strong one. Kip is strong in the Force. Luke folded his arms over his chest. He has a certain sympathy for Exar Kun. That reaction was not to be unexpected. I could buy into that, but I felt another presence. Not strongly, but it was there, and it helped Kip's next attack pack a wallop. And you think that was Exar Kun? I thought for a moment before answering. Either it is Exar Kun or someone calling himself Exar Kun because Kip reacted to that name. Could be it's someone just trying to wrap himself up in Kun's legend, just the way he presented himself to you as your father. Regardless, he's powerful, kind of what I would expect from a Dark Lord of the Sith. Luke shook his head. You're making a mistake jumping to the conclusion that we're dealing with Exar Kun. We don't know what happened to him in the end. Look, I've been with Tion as she's pulled as much information as we can from the holocron about Kun. He was running the culture here, and a massive Jedi strike wiped it out. Certain conclusions seem logical from there, I shrugged. I think planning for the worst-case scenario can't hurt. There might be gatekeepers in the holocron that have data about Exar Kun that neither you nor Tion can access. I will have to conduct my own investigation in that area. I caught a note of hesitancy in his voice. You're not thinking that just because you were able to redeem the last Dark Lord of the Sith, that Exar Kun might have had a change of heart, are you? Luke's face became impassive. That can't be ruled out. Wait a minute, you can't be serious. I watched him carefully. Look, if Exar Kun was never redeemed, if no other Dark Lord of the Sith ever saw the error of his ways and came back to the light side, that means nothing concerning your father. You're letting yourself think that if you'd been good enough, if you'd done everything right, your father would have survived. You're thinking that you didn't work hard enough to redeem him because if you had, he'd still be here. And you're thinking that if another Dark Lord had been redeemed, then you could compare what you did to what happened to him and learn if you really did do all you could do. No, no way, Luke shook his head adamantly. You have it all wrong. Could be, Master Skywalker, but... I swallowed hard. Look, I know exactly how this game is played because I did the same thing when my father died. Neither one of us can be certain that we did all we could to save them, but all the second-guessing in the galaxy won't give us a second chance at saving them. The only thing we can do is accept responsibility and live with the consequences. Luke's expression remained impassive, but even that told a story. Just for a moment, I got to see him as the human being he was. Raised by his relatives on Tatooine, always wondering about his parents, never learning how to properly deal with a mother or father, he had to constantly wonder why his life wasn't normal, not realizing that everyone asked himself that question. And then when he discovered who his father was, it turned out that his father was the trusted henchman of the galaxy's most hated individual. His father had not only killed people, but he had been the betrayer of the most noble tradition in the galaxy. He determined he would save his father, and did, just in time to lose him forever. I walked over and rested my hands on his shoulders. You did all you could do, you know that. Here, with this academy, you are helping erase the legacy your father left behind. What you are doing is good and vital, but you can't let your need for reassurance blind you to what's going on here right now. Kip is out of control, and under the influence of someone that is steeped in the dark side. You have to talk to him and straighten him out. I felt a wave of peace flow down over Luke. You've now reasoned your way to a conclusion I made before your confrontation with him. Kip is still in a state of turmoil. I think he would see intervention right now as a confrontation, don't you? I nodded. Let him sort his head out himself? He's a smart kid, it could definitely work, if I can be of any help. Just don't provoke him. I shook my head. I'm sorry for interfering, Master Skywalker. I'll gladly leave him alone. With his ally, he's out of my weight class anyway. I smiled carefully. I don't pick fights where I know I'll get pounded. Luke returned to my smile, unless there is a good reason. Right, and I can't think of one that will be good enough to deal with Kip anytime soon. In retrospect, there were billions of reasons to confront Kip and risk getting my head handed to me. Luke was the Jedi Master, and he asked me to step away, so I did because I agreed with his plans. Even now I wish I tried to do something, but all the scenarios I worked out in my head turned out just as bloody as the real thing did. Short of murdering Kip, I could have changed nothing, and by murdering him I would have irrevocably changed myself for the worst. I returned to a meal that we completed in relative silence. What comments were offered were light, often of pleasant remembrances of childhood days. I noticed that Master Skywalker and Mara Jade remained quiet during those exchanges, as did Brachus and I. The food itself was actually pretty good, though no one seemed to notice. And no matter how small the portions, no one seemed to finish what they had taken. After cleaning up, I retreated to my room and heard Mara eventually go to hers. I was having trouble getting to sleep and almost strolled over to talk with her, but the way she politely shut me out earlier gave me a clue that I would just be courting rejection. I clearly didn't need that, so I remained in my room, mentally reviewing and rehearsing the various moves I'd learned in using the lightsaber. At some point, the shrill bleating of an R2 unit penetrated my meditations. It took me a second to realize it wasn't Whistler. I grabbed my lightsaber and went running out of the great temple, trailing two silhouettes that had to be Master Skywalker and Mara Jade. As I came out into the cool night air, I saw Mara Jade's Z-95 headhunter streaking away into the starry sky. He stole my ship! Anger poured off Mara Jade in waves. We've got to go after him. Luke shook his head. We cannot. What do you mean? I cleared my voice. We don't have any ships here. Mara's jaw dropped. No ships? No X-Wings? You two without X-Wings? This is a school for Jedi, not pilots. Luke's face closed up as the other apprentices began to filter out of the great temple. Kip is gone. I don't know if he will be back or not. I hope so. Me too, Mara slowly ground a fist in the palm of her opposite hand. Steal my ship, will he? Luke fixed her with a hard stare. Mara, please calm yourself. You're not helping the situation. I've got to deal with my apprentices and explain this to them. After I see to them... The anger pulsating out of Mara lessened, but I had the feeling she just shielded its output. Go, Luke, I understand. Master Skywalker walked back toward the great temple and never gave me a glance. I watched him go but felt no inclination to follow. I didn't know what he was going to tell everyone else, but I was fairly certain I already knew more than he would share with them. Being there and questioning his motives and thinking would have been as disruptive as Mara's anger, so I remained behind. She glared at me. You can go too. I shook my head. Kind of a chilly night. Basking in the heat of your anger seems like a good choice. And if I don't want you here? Easy now, Mara. Your ship was stolen, that's all. I kept a light tone in my voice. It's not like the sun went supernova. It might as well have. I frowned. Am I missing something? That was just a Z-95 headhunter, right? Right, it was nothing. She scowled and then let it melt with a sigh. It was everything. I'm not tracking. Of course not. You've never had to track. Mara graced me with a disgusted look. You were incredibly lucky, you know that. Your family was part of Corsac, so your life was all mapped out for you. You went as far as you could there, then joined Rogue Squadron and strung victories together there. And then you find out that you're really from a Jedi family, and you end up here training to be what you've been destined to be since birth. It must have all just come very easy to you. It wasn't very easy at all. But at least you had a course plotted out for you. You had family supporting you in your decisions. She shook her head. In a galaxy coming apart at the fusion joints, you were able to cruise along smoothly. You're even here studying to become a Jedi while your wife has been taken away from you. You're so sure that what you're doing is right that you can set aside the anxiety and concentrate here, and you can do that because this is just one more trial in the life of a hero. I started to protest what she was saying, but faint echoes of it rang true. They meant little to me, however, because of the chill cutting up my spine as I reversed her words and applied them to what little I knew of her. You thought you were on the same sort of hero path, doing what you had to do to make a difference in the Empire, then bang, it's all gone. Everything you worked for and with vanishes, cutting you off, leaving you adrift. You've made your point. Sorry, I glanced away from her and off toward the jungle. You're smart enough and skilled enough to take care of yourself, but you've no longer got the benchmarks you used to measure your performance. Right, and everything has been swapped black for white in the galaxy. She turned to look off in the same direction as me, but jerked a thumb back towards the great temple. I came here for instruction and to learn where I fit into the new order of things. And the ship was your escape valve. If you didn't like things, you could take off. I felt a hint of resentment from her. I'm not one to quit a project I start. Didn't say you were. It's just you might find that what you get here isn't actually what you want or need. I turned to face her. You're not wholly wrong about my life, but you're not right about it either. When my parents died, I was left without knowing how to calibrate my moral compass. I found others who stepped in and helped me, but the search for that sort of support is one that goes on forever. You'll continue to do it. I'll continue to do it. Even Master Skywalker will do it. Is that so? It is. I found my hands had knotted into fists, so I willfully opened them. You and I are lucky in that we've got someone like Master Skywalker around to help us figure out where we are and where we're going. Her voice hardened. But you don't think he's handling this Kip Duron thing correctly. He's not doing it the way I would, but that doesn't mean I think Luke's heart isn't in the right place. It is. He knows where he wants to go and where he wants to take the Jedi. I'm just not sure he's navigating as smooth a course as he would like for the journey. Her head nodded, but she said nothing for a bit. I remained quiet, listening to the hunting cries of Stintarls split the night. For all the turmoil of the earlier evening, once Kip had left, things seemed to settle down. I let the evening's growing peace slowly seep into me. I don't like losing my freedom like this. I understand, but it really isn't a critical loss. New supply ship is due in a week, and it took Kip at least that long to get as good as he is. I gave her a quick smile. Allow yourself the chance to see if what Master Skywalker offers really is what you need. It's as good a plan as any, considering there's no alternative. Mara Jade let a little laugh slip out. You're destroying this image I had of you as a dumb fighter jock. Serves you right. You've been listening to things Booster Tarek has to say about me. True enough. She turned and started walking back to the Grand Temple. I understand you get up early and run in the morning. With the dawn. Mind company? You'd go running with me? I trotted over and fell into step with her. I generally take a pretty nasty course. You said it, I'll run it. Good enough, I smiled. Welcome to the Jedi Academy, Mara Jade. I hope you enjoy your stay. Chapter 19. Enjoy her stay she did, at least as measured by the purely pleasurable expression she wore when showing me up on our runs, or holding off one more remote than I possibly could at lightsaber practice. She might have been little accustomed to smiling, but she had a triumphant smirk down perfectly, and I got to study it enough to be able to etch it into stone from memory. This fact was made all the more damning because we actually saw very little of each other. In the mornings we would run together, then Luke would concentrate on working with Mara much as he had with Kip. That left Cam instructing the rest of us. After lunch we would listen to more Jedi lore from the holocron, then Mara and I would practice with the lightsaber. While I was not her equal with the shimmering blade, we would have been closely enough matched to seriously hurt each other, so Cam just pitted us against remotes. Kip's disappearance left the apprentices a bit uneasy. The arrival of a new apprentice, the Mon Calamari ambassador, Kilgal, both brought relief from the dismal mood that had fallen over the students and linked us back to the rest of the galaxy. She told us of Admiral Dalla's assault on Mon Calamari and the loss of one of her star destroyers, which was good news. The fact that pro-Imperial forces still existed out there also reinforced our resolve to become Jedi Knights, since the need for our presence was very clear. Early one afternoon, I sat in the common room, listening to Tion practice her ballads and Mara Jade interrogating Kilgal for details about the Imperial's assault on Mon Calamari, when R2... I always found it strange when they write R2 as A-R-T-O-O instead of R2. But anyways, when R2 rolled over and tugged on the shoulder of my robe with his pincer. He tootled briefly at me, then spun around and headed back out of the room. I followed him, and not surprisingly, he led me to Luke's chambers. Inside the door, I caught the acrid scent of melted electronics. A blackened puddle of melted plasteel on the room's table was the source of the stink. It still smoked, and some of it appeared to be still liquid. I looked over toward where Luke sat on his bunk, his brows knotted with concentration. What happened? Luke glanced at the little droid. R2 closed the door. He waited until the droid had complied with his wishes before continuing. You remember I said I'd check the holocron for more information on Exar Kun? I do. There was. Vodo Siask Bas was modeled on the Jedi that trained Exar Kun. I used him as a vector for my inquiries about what happened to Kun. Luke fell silent for a moment. Bas went to Coruscant to speak to his disciple to get him to return to the way of the Jedi. Kun killed him in the Senate chamber. I drew in a deep breath through my nose. That's not good news. No, it isn't. When I asked what happened, then, he pointed mutely at the melted device. In the resulting fire and bright light, I thought I saw the shadow of the dark man and heard his laughter. I stared at the black mess again and felt my mouth go dry. That is the holocron? I think was is the correct verb tense. I ran a hand back through my hair. I think my brain hurts. And the shadow you saw, could it have been a trick of the light? The Jedi Master shrugged uneasily. Could have been. I passed my hand above the melted holocron and caught some residual heat. Is Exar Kun our guy? Luke shook his head. I don't know. 4,000 years is a long time. I'd rather think someone being trained by the Empire, someone being used like Mara, discovered Exar Kun's studies and has fashioned himself into a new Dark Lord of the Sith. Don't have to go far for a candidate, my nostrils flared. I think Kip will do. Don't think that's not crossed my mind. He was so powerful and eager, but that just fed his impatience. Luke looked up at me. You said the other day I was afraid I'd failed my father. Maybe that's true. I know I failed Kip. No, Kip failed you. I leaned back on the table. Kip agreed to undergo serious training, but didn't know what he was getting into. He'd been a mind slave all his life. You showed him how powerful he was. He was learning how to make his own decisions, and suddenly grand new vistas opened up for him. It's all but impossible for people like me or Cam or Mara to deal with such power, but Kip? Luke's expression darkened. You're not making things better here. I'm sorry, you're the Jedi Master and you know what you're doing, but I think you need to refocus on those students still here. I sighed loudly. Kip may be gone forever, or he may come back. We don't know. What we do know is that your original mission, the reason you created the Academy, is still valid. The Jedi Knights need to return to the galaxy, and you're the only hope to make that happen. The Jedi Master remained silent for a moment, then nodded just once. The Order is what we need. That has to be my focus. Agreed. I gave him a hopeful look. I also think we need to decide what we're going to do about Exar Kun. Right. Luke hunched forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His cloak slid down around his shoulders and flanks, making him look smaller than I'd ever seen him before. Evidence we've got points to Exar Kun, or a disciple of his pretending to be. I've searched this temple and have found tiny traces of evil. Not enough for Exar Kun. I toyed with my goatee for a moment. I thought I heard someone, Bodo Bass perhaps, say the temples here had all been raised as a focus for Exar Kun's power. Maybe this temple isn't the focus of it, but just linked to it. If the link was forged of Sith magic, Exar Kun might be able to block backtracing. Another of the temples here, then, would be the center point of his power. Luke nodded, then sat back. Good idea. That temple could also be where Gantoris and Kip obtained instruction. If we only knew where it was. I smiled. I think we can find out. How? Survey logs. Everyone has been out surveying the local sites. Yes, but that was after Gantoris died. Luke's eyes narrowed, and Kip would have falsified his logs to hide where he had been. True, but he was out all of the time with Dorsk 81, who wouldn't have had any reason to falsify his survey reports. I smiled slowly. If you ask for everyone to turn in their survey logs and told them you'll be conducting an exercise about observation, I can go over them and sort out the likely spots our Kun clone is hiding out. Okay, we'll do that. Luke stood and came over to stare at the ruined holocron. By destroying the holocron, our enemy may have done more to hurt us than he knows. In his fondest dreams, I gave him an easy grin. What we've learned of Jedi history is good. We're certain we're heirs to that tradition. Now you need to use what you know to transform us into the people who will further that legend. Feeling Mara Jade's back pressed against mine, I had to smile. Cam isn't making this easy, is he? Her blue lightsaber hummed and spat as it batted away a remote's fiery dart. Easy isn't for Jedi, is it? Nope. I extended my senses as far as I could, taking in most of the darkened hangar space. Cam had closed the door and turned off all the lights, leaving our lightsabers to provide the only illumination. 8 remotes floated out through the darkness, dancing through a complex weave of paths that allowed one to eclipse another. If we did not concentrate enough to project our senses into the hollows behind the remotes or the pillars, we left ourselves pitifully vulnerable. Cam had also turned the exercise into one of teamwork, because half the remotes were meant for me to deal with, and half for Mara, yet they could target either one of us. For every dart from one of ours that would hit home, we lost a point. Points we earned by blocking shots. I was actually less worried about losing in score to Mara than having her at my back with a lightsaber when my remotes peppered her rump with stingers I should have blocked. Out there in the darkness, I felt the shift of energy. With my lightsaber on my right, I swept it out parallel to the floor, picking off a low shot coming in at my right knee. At my midline, I snapped the blade vertical, then waggled it right and left, intercepting 2 more bolts sizzling through the dark. Then releasing with my right hand, I dropped to my left knee and slashed out, deflecting a dart coming in from my flank. I cranked my left wrist around, relishing the lightsaber's tenor hum, and getting my right hand back on the hilt. While I learned enough to be fairly good with the blade in one hand, my left was still my offhand and didn't possess all the fine control I wanted. The blade itself could be wielded effortlessly, but that made it deceptively dangerous. Twirling it in my hands would have been as easy as twirling a stylus through my fingers, but dropping the lightsaber or having it wobble in the direction of face or knee would have hurt. A lot. I felt a shot coming in from directly above me. My initial reaction was to raise the blade and stab it back behind my head, but Mara was standing there. Given no choice, I leapt up as high as I could and thrust the lightsaber above my head. The silvery blade took the dart on the point, infusing my blade with a red sheen for a moment. I laughed triumphantly, then saw Mara's cerulean blade whirl through a complete circle, passing beneath me as it picked off 3 darts vectoring in at odd angles. I landed and crouched again, then pivoted left and blocked another shot a second before Mara's blade came around and struck mine. Light flared where our blades intersected, and then I threw myself backward and rolled off to the right, letting the strength of her cut provide the energy for my roll. Coming around and up, I one-handed the blade with my right hand, flicking 2 more remote darts off into the darkness, then I took one straight in the stomach. I shunted the pain away immediately and stepped back. I saw Mara spin away from a trio of darts, one of which hit her right in the right shoulder. Her blade moved a fraction too slow after that, allowing 2 more to lance through her right hip. Her spin, which had started voluntarily, continued without her consent, dropping her to the hangar floor. Her blade came up and warded off another shot, then a dart hit her in the small of the back, collapsing her legs as she tried to get back up. I saw her lying there on her belly, her legs tangled, her hair a veil that picked up argent highlights from my lightsaber. At the same time, I felt 3 remotes moving around, closing in for the kill. 2 were coming in toward her feet and 1 near her head. Her lightsaber had winked out and lay there, next to her left hand, now useless in her defense. I was left one choice, and that was no real choice at all. I dove toward her, slicing my lightsaber through the air near her legs with my right hand. The argent blade blocked the 2 darts meant to further cripple her. I couldn't help letting a smile get started when that happened because I knew it would not last long. 2 centimeters in front of her face, my left hand snatched the 3rd bolt from the air. Searing pain shot up my arm, but I pulled the energy into me and turned it around to help calm furious nerves. My smile continued to grow as that transformation took place, and my spirit soared because of my success. Unfortunately, a soaring spirit does little for a falling body. I hit the floor rather hard, landing solidly on my chest. I bounced back up a bit, with my toes hitting just before my knees. I tried to twist around and land on my left hip so I could keep my blade in the air and active, but all I really managed to do was start myself rolling, which resulted in my wrapping myself around a pillar. My lightsaber whirled out of my grasp and spun to a stop about 10 meters away. Its silvery glow illuminated the remotes closing in on me. I sighed. I have a bad feeling about this. Get it? He said, I have a bad feeling about this. The remotes did not shoot. I rolled over and flopped on my back. In the distance between my unpraised knees, I could see Mara Jade on her side dragging herself along in my direction. Sweat had pasted strands of her hair to her face and gave her skin an icy blue gleam in her reignited lightsaber's backlight. The flesh around her eyes tightened as she moved her legs, but she gave no other indication that she felt any discomfort. Cam's voice echoed through the chamber. That's enough for now. You did pretty well. I laughed. If that's true, why do I feel so bad? It's because, Kieran, you didn't do well enough. Thanks for the clarification, Cam. I dropped my knees and laid my head back down on the cold stone floor. I ran a hand through my goatee, brushing away the sweat that had collected in it, then felt the sting of sweat leaking into my eyes. I let my head loll to the left and smiled as Mara inched her way into view. Hurt much? A Jedi doesn't know pain. Right, me too. I looked over at where my lightsaber still lay. I extended a hand in that direction and tried to call the blade to me, but all I got was a little twitching of the hilt. These are the times I could really use better telekinesis skills. You're just being lazy. Just walk over and get it. Okay, in a minute. Mara laughed lightly, then sighed. Thanks for the save. No problem. You'd do the same for me. Her voice drained of all lighter tones. Would I? I had to think for a second. You would. The universe you knew growing up may have changed, but your core values of duty and loyalty haven't. Not that I think you'd ever feel yourself that beholden to someone else, but you'd extend that sort of courtesy to someone you see as a friend, right? Silence answered me. I rolled myself up on my left flank and rested my head on my left hand. We are friends, right? Her eyes narrowed, then her lightsaber went out and again, sinking her into shadow. I don't know if I really know what it means to have a friend in the same sense you think of it. I do think I trust you. I'll take that. Is that why you sacrificed your hand to protect my face, because you think of me as a friend? In part, yes, a very big part. I nibbled my lower lip for a moment, then continued. I also did it because I know I could, and therefore it was my duty to do so. Even back when I entered Corsac, I knew there were things that I'd be called upon to do, dangerous things, that I would do because others could not. My role in society was to take action and responsibility for those who could not. I think deep down that's the essence of being a Jedi. A Jedi places himself where he can defend the greatest number of people from the greatest evil, even if it costs him his life. I exhaled slowly. You never want to think about that, but it's part of the job. I remember a couple of times in my life, with Rogue Squadron and before, when I knew it was my duty to get a job done. I felt pretty certain I would die in those attempts, and nearly did on Telesia. Fact was, though, that I had friends who would die if I didn't do anything, and somehow my life didn't seem to matter all that much in the equation. Mara snorted. The Emperor would have considered you a sentimental fool who deserved to die. I'll remember that the next time I dance on his grave. Well, I hope he stays in his grave and doesn't, come back. I levered myself up into a sitting position and crossed my legs beneath me. There are just times the sacrifice feels right. It did then, it did today. Just a judgment you'll have to make for yourself when the time comes, I guess. Not an easy decision to make. Nope. I stood and offered her a hand. She took it and I steadied her as she got back onto her feet. But then, as you said, easy isn't for a Jedi, is it? And now, Chapter 20. Master Skywalker tossed his cloak to Cam and brought the hilt of his lightsaber to hand. Thank you, Cam. If you would see to the others for a while. As you wish, Master Skywalker. The Jedi Master looked up at me as I slipped my lightsaber into my right hand. We don't have to do this, Kieran. I gave him a wry grin. I think we do, Master. And I think you have a question you want to ask. Luke nodded slowly. Is our duel a prelude to your leaving, too? The pure pain in his voice sank into me and pinned my heart against my spine. Luke was watching his dream of the Jedi Academy collapse around him. Gantoris had been roasted alive with his own hatred and anger. Kip, his most promising student, had fallen under the sway of an ancient evil and had vanished. Mara Jade, one of the Emperor's trusted practitioners of the Force, had come to the Academy for instruction, but inside a week had chosen to leave again, and even that morning had been whisked away by Han Solo and Lando Calrissian aboard the Millennium Falcon. This is one thing that I find a little bit weird, is just like how many time jumps are in this this book and in this section of the book of how long they've been training at this Jedi Academy. Like all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, by the way, a week went by and Mara Jade left. By the way, it was freaking Han Solo and Lando Calrissian of all people on the Millennium Falcon. But yeah, continuing. For having been open for only a little more than a month, the failure rate for promising students was staggering. I could have taken Luke's question as a confirmation of my abilities, but I felt it really marked how battered he felt at the moment. I could understand that because I was feeling a little betrayed by Mara's departure as well. I saw her that morning when I'd arrived to get her for our run. Ready to go? Yeah, she replied, but not running. She stood in her room in the color-shifting flight suit in which she had arrived. Her bed had been made up, and the Jedi robe she'd worn had been folded neatly and placed at the foot of the bed beside her heavy satchel. Thought another candidate might find a use for the robe. I leaned against the door jamb, using my body to bar the way out. I thought you told me you weren't a quitter. A little fire blazed in her eyes, but she brought it under control with an ease that surprised me. I'm not. I've learned a lot here, but what I needed to learn isn't exactly what you need or what others here need to learn. Want to run that by me again with the help files enabled this time? She relaxed just ever so slightly, shifting her weight to her back foot. When the Empire trained me, I learned a lot of the things all of you are learning. I practiced them and perfected them. You and I have trained together with lightsabers. Do you think I picked all that up in an afternoon or two of quick study? I shrugged. Well, with Cam and me as examples, it's possible. Cute, Corin, but you know it's not true. Okay, score one for Mara Jade. The flesh around her eyes tightened. My Imperial training directed me toward using dark side techniques for tapping the Force. I let emotions fuel what I did. I came here thinking Luke would show me new things I could do, new abilities to learn. But what he did instead was to show me how to employ the light side. I'm still doing the same things, but I have a new fuel source. One that runs a bit leaner, isn't as easily accessible. Right, but one that won't burn the engine out. She graced me with an open, green-eyed gaze that surprised me with its vulnerability. The other day, when you were talking about the willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, you mentioned friends and those who could not take responsibility for themselves. I started thinking about the Smugglers Alliance. I've got a lot of things to think about. I nodded slowly, and your little sojourn here was prompted in part by being uncomfortable with that responsibility. And here I thought all Corsac agents were not that bright. We have our moments. Up to now, I've been responsible for myself. I've been able to make decisions, but I've been comfortable with them on a tactical level. With Carday putting me in charge of the Alliance, I need to think more strategically. He's counting on me to do the right thing. More pressure. I can handle it. I refuse to fail him, but you aren't sure you're comfortable doing it. I smiled. I understand. This is why I'm content to be a pilot in Rogue Squadron, not someone leading my own group of fighter pilots. I don't want to get so spread out that I can't make a difference when I need to. Mara's gaze sharpened. I bet the smugglers working your sector of the Corellian system didn't like you at all. Can't understand why. Should I have had my sting operations catered or something? I shook my head. They traded in rare commodities, and I traded them the rarest of all for their wares, time. Yeah, on Kessel. Time goes a long way there. Here we go with Kessel again. And I didn't even charge extra for it. I straightened up and offered her my hand. I'm sorry to see you go. I thought between us we could really kick some life into this place and help Luke move the students onto the next level of development. I hesitate to say it, but it's been fun working with you. Mara gave me one of her carefully hoarded smiles. For something that started off with our arguing and my ship getting stolen, the experience hasn't been as bad as I would have thought. Thanks for your help. If there's anything I can do for you... Actually, there is, I gave her a weak smile. With your contacts in the smuggling community, maybe you'd hear something about Mirax. I'd appreciate hearing anything. I'd owe you. How about a swap? She hitched for a second, then glanced down at the floor. Watch out for Luke for me, will you? Sure, gladly. I frowned. Anything specific? I know he won't like your leaving. That, certainly. Her voice shrank a bit. His involvement with the dark side. I know it functions as a spur to drive him on to teach his students, but I don't think he knows how much he was hurt by it. The experience had to be unbelievably traumatic, and he's still healing. I don't fear a relapse, but maybe, I don't know. He might try to do too much too fast. That would be like him. I nodded and wanted to kick myself for not having seen it sooner. For Luke, for anyone, the journey to the dark side and back would have been like being shot multiple times at point-blank range. Back to therapy might heal the physical wounds, but the memories and nightmares resulting would take time to work out. While the Jedi calming techniques might get rid of the resulting anxiety, they just treated the symptoms without curing the underlying problems. Only time could heal them, time and the love and support of friends. I'll watch him for you. Take care of yourself, okay? Will do. And if any of your smuggler pals manage to have some spare food, good food they need to offload somewhere, you know where we could use it. Mara shouldered her satchel and slipped past me. You've got it, Corsac. See you a couple parsecs down the line. After Luke saw her off, he took us listlessly through the morning's exercise. He clearly was trying to do his best with us, but his heart wasn't in it. I recognized in him the same sort of behavior Ayala had reported in me after my father's death. He was thinking too hard about what had happened and allowing himself to dwell in the past while the rest of the universe was sliding on into the future. In my case, Ayala and Gil Bastra had taken me to one of the seediest cantinas on Treasure Ship Row. The place, called the Fell Swoop, was packed with a rough crowd of swoop riders and speeder bike jockeys. After a lot of Corellian whiskey, they got me singing a little song about the lack of brains and intestinal fortitude of speeder bike enthusiasts. My singing voice, even at the best of times, would cause a riot in a receptive audience, and the resulting brawl kind of tore the place apart. Fact was, though, that the aches and pains and scars that resulted brought me back into the real world and anchored me there. Unfortunately for me, we didn't have any cantina to hit, nor did we have any whiskey to drink. I felt a little physical activity would still be good for Luke and help ground him again, so I challenged him to a duel. Cam explained that there were things I needed to learn from a living foe, and that he, Cam, did not have the control necessary to spar with me. It would be up to Luke to make sure I didn't hit him and he didn't hit me, causing him to concentrate. I lit my lightsaber, letting its snap hiss fill the hangar. Fair question to ask if I'm leaving or not. You've got ample reason to ask it. No, I'm not going anywhere, unless, of course, this fight goes badly for one or the other of us. Luke's green blade sprang to life. Let me see what you have learned. I closed with him and arced a cut in toward his left shoulder. He came up and blocked it high left, picking it up in the outer ring of defense. I came down and around in a sweeping blow at his left leg, but he brought his lightsaber down and batted mine aside easily. The spark of light exploding from the contact of the two blades washed shadows across Luke's disinterested expression. About what I expected. Shifting my lightsaber to my right hand, I closed quickly and snapped the blade down in an overhand cut. I picked up my speed on the cut, forcing Luke to block me in the middle ring. Continuing my forward movement, I pushed in with my right hand, then slid the lightsaber's hilt down. I hammered his breastbone with the lightsaber's hilt, then hooked my right leg behind Luke's right leg and dumped him to the ground. I backed off as his blade's green light illuminated the surprise on his face. I let an edge drift into my voice. If you aren't going to respect me, at least respect what Cam has taught me. Luke slowly climbed back to his feet, but did so with his lightsaber always remaining between the two of us. I kept my blade angled across my body, with my hands held near my right hip and the blade's tip hovering near my left shoulder. I stamp-feinted with my right foot, as if I were beginning a charge, and Luke withdrew a half step. He's got to focus. I waited for him to set himself. Then I came in on a circular approach that worked me toward his left. I slashed twice crosswise, forehand and back, to keep him away from me, then dove straight toward him. I lunged with the blade. Luke's green lightsaber came around in a circular parry that carried my blade wide to my right. His triumphant laugh died abruptly as my right foot kicked him in the gut. While he'd parried, I'd recovered from my lunge and kicked out straight into his midsection. He doubled over and fell back a couple of steps, his left hand rubbing his belly, but I gave him no chance to recover. I came on hard and fast, whipping my silver blade through an infinity loop, lashing out high and low. Luke looked up at me and his eyes hardened, which is when I ran into a force wall that bounced me back a couple of feet and set me on my heels. I tasted blood on my lips, but knew it was really coming from my nose, which hurt. I didn't think it was broken, but bumping it up against anything solid is seldom a pleasant experience. I wiped it off on the sleeve of my green tunic, but in the half light, both it and the blood looked black. Nice trick. A feral grin twisted Luke's mouth. He came forward wordlessly, moving with a fluidity I'd not seen in him before. He aimed a slash at me that would have bisected me from right shoulder to left hip. I caught a momentary flash of surprise from him because he'd expected me to block it high right, but I let it come through the outer and middle rings of defense. With a quick parry, I slid it wide of my right shoulder. Then I stepped forward and slammed my right shoulder into Luke's chin. That stood him up, clicking his teeth sharply together. I drove a weak jab with my left hand into his ribs, then ducked a slash that should have trimmed my hair at roughly the level of my earlobes. Dropping into a crouch, I whipped my left leg out and scythed it through his legs, bashing his ankles together and again dropping him onto his back. I rolled away and stood, looking down at him. I would have thought you'd be better than this. Luke slowly got up and wiped a trickle of blood from his split lip away with his left hand. Never had much rough and tumble growing up. My friends and I were more involved in racing than fighting. Then maybe you should be a Jedi racer, not a knight. You don't understand, Luke spat out some bloody saliva. There are things in play here, forces shifting. Maybe I could understand if you'd talk about it. I lowered my blade. You're the Jedi Master, but that doesn't mean you should shoulder all the responsibility. You know that already. You've been letting Tion learn and share history. Cam's been handling some of the instruction, and you've had me working on the Dark Man problem. And I think I have Exar Kun's temple pegged from Dorsk 81's survey logs, by the way. Figured I'd check it later this afternoon. No, Luke shook his head adamantly. You're not going to go there alone. I don't want any of the students to go there. So you go, and I'll back you up. He hesitated, then shook his head. Can't, not now. Why not? Luke closed his eyes and sighed. Do you recall how I told you of knowing my friends were in trouble on Bespin? Yes, you said that was a vision of the future. I narrowed my eyes. You said Darth Vader allowed you to sense it to lure you into a trap. I have had other visions, other feelings. Pain tightened Luke's expression. There is disaster in the offing. It remained a bit more distant when Mara was here, but now I feel it is much closer. Do something about it. What? Luke's question came almost as a plea. I have this oppressive sense of doom approaching. It touches on everyone and everything. All the things I think about doing don't seem to make it go away. I swiped at more blood from my nose with my left hand. Slow down for a moment. Do you know if this doom, this future, is locked in hollow, or is it morphable? The future is always morphable, but nothing I think to do will change it. Two things you're overlooking here, Master Skywalker. First, thinking is closer to trying than doing, if you catch my drift. Changing the future has got to require action, not just planning for action. While a Jedi acts in defense and not out of aggression, that doesn't mean aggressively putting a defense into place is bad. Luke nodded slowly. And the second thing? Maybe you're not the one who has to act. Maybe it's me, or Cam, or all of us together. I sighed. You're teaching us how to use the Force. You're opening us up to new powers. And you've established that we are heirs to a Jedi tradition full of responsibility. Fact is, though, that you've not given us any responsibility. Defeating this disaster you feel coming, getting rid of Exar Kun, or whoever the Dark Man is, might just require all of us finally accepting our responsibilities as Jedi. Right now, you're accepting every scrap of responsibility here. You're getting buried under the weight of what you see as a string of failures. Mara Jade didn't leave here because you failed her. She left because you succeeded. She learned what she needed to learn, which might not have been what you thought she needed to learn. She left because she didn't want to fail others to whom she felt responsible. He opened his eyes. You think I've been treating all of you like children? Closer to the mark than you want to know. I haven't meant to, but you are children within the Force. That's fine, Master Skywalker, and true. But we're also a disparate group of adults. Kip was what, our youngest? And he was the age you were when you started your training. He was the age I was when I went into the Corsac Academy. We're pretty well formed at that point, personality-wise. Those who have come here to learn from you have already made a decision to explore a new life. You need to let us do that. You need to challenge us, and challenges aren't just the size of rocks or the range of a vision one can project. Those challenges test our skills, not our characters, and the failures here have been failures of character. But you are not ready for such challenges. Not if you're going to make them marrow-blasting challenges, no. I pointed at his right hand. Did you learn a lot from your failure at Bespin? Luke's fingers flexed. Yes. Then let us fail a bit and learn how to deal with it. As we used to say in Corsac, there are two types of speeder bike racers, those who have fallen off and those who are going to fall off. Jedi will fail, and if they don't learn how to deal with failure, if they don't have the spine to recover from it, you'll lose them. Luke's lightsaber died. I have to think about what you said. Don't just think, Master. Act. I thumbed my blade off as well, letting darkness swallow us. If you don't act, the disaster you feel could be on a scale from which none of us could possibly recover. End of chapter 20. Okay, so the parts of this that I feel have been interesting in these chapters is mainly like how there's so much conflict between Corran and Luke. Like it seems like they're always fighting, and like it's portraying Luke as like he's trying to do the right thing, but then Corran's like, no, Luke, like you need to see it this way. You know, like it, and Corran fighting Luke with a lightsaber, and he's actually like kicking Luke and beating Luke, and Luke's falling down and bleeding. Like it's at least I wouldn't think, being the reader reading this for the first time, that like anyone could beat up a Jedi like Luke Skywalker, and yet here it is. So yeah, that's the end of this for now. I will see you in the next part of RockMan Reads a Freakin Book, where DK left off.